Everyone, so yeah, I'm back from my next review. As you can see, we're going way back to the collection update before my last collection update. And today, obviously, we're going to be talking about the Bandai Godzilla 1968 from the movie Monster series. So yeah, as many of you know, this is now a very hard to come by figure. Yeah, we haven't really seen a whole lot of reissues of these at all. Bandai really hasn't been focusing on their classic monsters recently, at least not in the 6-inch scale. Now we're seeing more releases of the classic monsters through Bandai America or Bandai Creation, now Playmates. But for those of you that didn't watch the collection update, story behind how I got this. There was an auction going off on eBay right around the same time that I bought my Memorial Box Gigan. And I had been planning this because this was going to be for my stop-motion movie, which has yet to go anywhere. I haven't even figured out what exactly I want to do with it yet, so it's still on hold, especially with me planning my trip to Japan next year. That I'll talk about in a separate video. But right around the same time, I was planning on getting the 1974 Godzilla if I could find one for a decent price. Unfortunately, those don't go for a decent price. Probably the best price you're going to find is around $75. I wasn't willing to pay that at the time. So, needless to say, I went shopping for a 1968. And this one just happened to pop up. Brand new condition, really. There's a couple paint scuffs, mainly on the eye and on the toes. But other than that, brand new. And I bid on it. It was $20. I was the only bidder for the 2 weeks that it was on there. So, I won it by default. This got shipped to me from Japan and also came with his tag, which was a real deal sealer for me because this is actually the first movie Monsters figure that I ever owned. Never actually had a Bandai Japan Godzilla figure up until recently because obviously, as you guys know, I have the large 2002, 2003, and the Memorial Box Gigan. But yeah, so well, I've got the tag out. As you guys can see on the front, it says Godzilla 1968, but we've got a picture of the Meguro Gochi, 73 to 75, which doesn't make any sense to me, but okay. And on the inside, obviously, it's in Japanese, and you got the stats on Godzilla as well as a picture of the 68 suit, and on the back, the movie Monster series emblem and 2006 on a foil sticker there. So, yeah, we'll get that out of the way and get on to the figure. So, detail-wise, this is your standard Godzilla 1968 figure. Not too much different. I do much prefer this sculpt over the Bandai Creation figure, mainly because he's in a better pose. Having him posed like this is a lot better than having him... I'll pull out the Bandai Creation one then. But the skin texture is good, obviously. The tail itself is your standard Godzilla tail, very thick. Would love to see him and the 74 figure be made by NECA, just to see what they would do with the 68 sculpt. But we've obviously got the ridging on his spines. And like most Bandai Creation or most Bandai figures, they paint partially down the tail, and then the rest are just black. Yes. So, yeah. Really the only noticeable issue is the little paint scuff there on the eye, because it's not on the other eye. I could probably go over that with some paint, just fill it in a little bit, but it doesn't really matter. Obviously got the toes, decent paint on there, and his little skin flap on his chest. Yeah, so you got the signature 68 face. Yeah. So, articulation-wise, if this will focus, he's your standard Godzilla Bandai figure. The arms go 360, and thankfully these don't scratch against the thighs at all. The legs also go 360. But what's neat is how they designed the legs, or like the, I guess you could call it the crotch area, because when you pose the legs back, they actually kind of lock into place, which is kind of nice, but it gives him that 68 stance, I guess you could call it. Very much the figures, like just the way the suit would stand. So yeah, the tail does have a glue seal. From what I can tell, it wasn't broken, and I'm not going to break it just because I don't feel the need to. So yeah, now as I was saying, to talk about the Creation 68, yeah. So Bandai Japan, Bandai America. This figure is good, especially if you're like a young collector. It was really good for me, especially when I was starting to get into Godzilla, because these were the easiest way to collect figures over here in the States, because you could just go to just about any store, Toys R Us, KB Toys, when that was still in business, which is, I think, actually where I got this from. I know I got my Final Wars figures from KB Toys, but yeah, so over here in the States, these were like the great things because kids in America could collect. And I still respect the figure. I mean, it's not a bad sculpt, but I would not call it a great sculpt whatsoever, mainly because of the way that he's stanced really doesn't make him good at scaling with any other figures. I mean, looking at just how he scales up with the Bandai Creations Hedorah. Yeah, he shouldn't be taller. So, yeah, it does present some issues scaling wise. And I also see a little bit of like a hint of the the Meguro Goji suit in him, mainly just because if this thing will focus, the lip flap, like the little ridge on the lip, seems like it's a little bit more pronounced, like on the 73 suit. Like how you can tell right there. Whereas on the 68 suit, it doesn't really seem to be as pronounced as it. So, yeah. And another thing is the tail. The tail's short and curved. Yeah, it doesn't really give you a whole lot of... It saves on space, I will say that. It's not as high in space requirements as the Bandai Japan figure, but it just seems to me like the tail isn't very proportionate to the body. So, yeah. And while we have them out, so Bandai Japan Godzilla next to Bandai Creations Hedorah, which I'd say this is probably accurate. You could probably get away doing this with stop motion. Obviously, Hedorah doesn't pose well, but yeah, I would say that this is a fair sizing. So, we'll get him out of the way. Obviously, the other foe that he fought, which would be Gigan, also a good sizing. I'd say they're right about the same size, based from what we can see in the movie. Probably a fair assumption. So, yeah, you can always use that. That was actually part of my plan for my stop motion movie, as well as a foe that he didn't fight, but it was one that still one worthy of pulling out if I can get him. Yeah. Mechagodzilla. Now, this is also accurate because if you watch Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla is a little bit taller than Godzilla himself. So, yeah, this is also one of my plans for my stop-motion movie as well. Have Mechagodzilla and Gigan team up against Godzilla. Will it happen? We don't know. I don't even know yet because I haven't really decided on what I'm doing with it yet. And for shits and giggles, we'll bring out Ultraman Taro, which he's obviously taller than Godzilla, even though he shouldn't be. However, if you buy the Ultra 500 Ultraman figures, this is probably a little bit more accurate, because Ultraman isn't really supposed to be the same size. I'd say maybe this big. Yeah. But, yeah, you could probably get away with this for a stop-motion movie. So, yeah. Obviously, we don't need a history. It's Godzilla. Everybody knows his history. But, overall, I'd say this figure is definitely, if you can find it, definitely worth the grab, especially now because it's a more rare figure than it was, say, 10 years ago. 10 years ago, you could still go on to Monster Valley Toys, for those of you that remember that, and still order one, have it shipped to you. That was actually how I got Taro, was through them. But yeah, even going back, I'd say maybe 6-7 years, you could still find this figure. I don't know exactly when they took these out of production, but yeah, if you happen to come across this on an auction or a buy now, I would highly recommend it, even just for a collector's piece. It's definitely worth the pickup. Great little figure to have. And yeah, so paint's good. Obviously mine's a little bit scuffed, but that's because I bought a used toy. Sizing's good. The articulation, it's basic. So I'll give it a 3.5 out of 5. It's a good figure for what it is. I mean, it's nothing spectacular articulation-wise or anything. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll see you guys later.